Good afternoon, everybody. A very warm welcome to you all from wherever you're joining us from around Australia or indeed overseas. I'm Virginia Birrell, the National Executive Officer of the Australia-China Business Council and CEO of the Victorian branch. I'll begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet today from all the localities around Australia and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Following the sign-off from the Trade Minister in Victoria, we are delighted to be able to officially announce that our branch is a partner with Global Victoria's Trade Alliance program for this series of events. The program is part of the Victorian Government's $15.7 million export recovery package to help exporters deal in this state with the effects of the pandemic by connecting them to new markets, strengthening existing markets, and helping them adapt their export strategies to remain globally competitive. Exports, as you know, play a crucial role in supporting Victoria's economy and will continue to do so, contributing more than $45 billion annually to our state's economy and helping to support over 300,000 jobs. The Global Victoria Trade Alliance partners play a crucial role in supporting business in Victoria's export sector to use the in-market expertise of our respective networks and, in our case, draw on the in-country experience from our 5 international trade and investment offices in China. Our thanks to the in-market representative, Victoria's Deputy Commissioner Nick Henderson, who's based in Chengdu, for joining us online today. And also to Jason Fitz and his team at Global Victoria for supporting this event and our initiative of the series, which will run into 2022. So today's session is all about getting your goods to China. We've gathered together some of the best and most well-informed experts in international shipping, customs and global logistics to help you understand the current state of play with China and broader regional trends and policy shifts that you need to be aware of. Each speaker will give a presentation followed by a panel discussion. I see from our registration questions we have a wide range of exporters and business leaders in our audience today, and those in agribusiness and food are particularly well represented. It's good to see many new exporters online today also, together with some China market veterans, and I encourage you all to ask questions of our speakers during the Q&A session at the end of the presentations. One of the things that binds everyone together viewing today is your expressed interest in accessing the China market through export. Along with China, countries like Singapore, South Korea, Malaysia, and other Southeast Asian nations are regarded as important export markets for Australian goods and services. We hope that much of the advice and supply chain updates today will apply not only to China, but also to other international markets in the Asian region that may be of interest to you. In the effort of maximising time for our speakers, a copy of today's agenda, along with their bios, has been emailed out to you before this event. You can also find a link in the chat window on the bottom of your screen. There will be time for questions at the end of today, so please direct any to the Q&A box at the bottom of your window. We have a number of pre-submitted questions, and we'll do our best to get through as many as we possibly can. A note that this event is being recorded and a copy will be made available to our attendees after the event, along with copies of the speakers' presentations and an executive summary. To open the proceedings and to give us an on-the-ground report from China, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome our long-standing friend and supporter, Nick Henderson, the Victorian Government's Deputy Commissioner for China. A fluent Mandarin Chinese speaker and competent facilitator of trade and commercial opportunities, Nick has over 20 years Asia-based experience, 17 of those living in China, in a range of operational management, brand building, brand strategy development and strategic roles, primarily assisting companies start up and grow within the complex Chinese market environment. So over to you, Nick. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, from Chengdu in southwest China. It's a pleasure on behalf of the Victorian State Government to provide an introduction to today's event. Global Victoria is very pleased to be supporting this excellent ACBC Victoria event and series as a collaboration through our Global Victoria Trade Alliance program. Through this series, ACBC Victoria will be curating and delivering a number of events and unpacking the elements, insights and tools that are important to navigate and create ongoing success in the China market. Today's session is the second in a series of events that focuses on a broad range of elements that is broken into three parts. So the series is broken into Why China, Growing in China, and Strategic China Briefing. So first, Why China? The series will cover FTAs, logistics and shipping, market research, distribution, channel structure, building and maintaining commercial relationships, and tips for creating long-term success in the market. Grow Your Exports covers market research, market diversification, and managing COVID environments. We encourage you to join the series to gain a broad range of knowledge and insights to support your activities and commercial plans within the Chinese market. So to today's session, Getting Your Goods to China focuses on the all-important topic of logistics, quarantine, clearance, and finding the right port of entry. This topic has never been more critical than now, given the complexities of both the bilateral relationship, but global shipping and logistics are facing. The world's shipping systems have suffered a major shock due to COVID. This is being exacerbated by global container shortages, Chinese sea and airport closures periodically, and reductions in capacity due to COVID outbreaks. And just recently, we had the Ningbo port closed for a period of time, which had massive flow-on effects throughout logistics channels around the world. This is resulting in increased delays in shipping, not to mention increased costs for sea freight and air freight, and also increased customs clearance times. And it's something that obviously is a real issue that is facing many businesses across a broad spectrum of product categories. For high value and time sensitive fresh produce, obviously these issues become even more critical. We're finding sometimes that containers are arriving with product that's already spoiled. So understanding and adhering to the changing product import and regulatory requirements, understanding what's going on with clearance times in those ports has never been more important. Rates of container clearance delays, inspections, and shipment detentions are high. So working with really good quality partners, having specialist expertise to support you in this highly dynamic environment, and keeping well informed and compliant is a necessity. So I, like all of you, are very much looking forward to hearing from today's speakers and followed by a Q&A session to get more insights into this particular topic. So thank you very much, Virginia, and over to you.
Terrific. Thanks, Nick. Always a pleasure to have you presenting for us. Thank you. Now it's my pleasure to introduce former senior trade official, diplomat and consultant with over 20 years experience in international trade, aid, entrepreneurship and marketing, Arnold Jorge, CEO of the Export Council of Australia, who'll give us an overview of exporting. Thank you, Arnold.
Thank you, Virginia. Let me just see if I could quickly share my screen before I start. Okay, if I can just go back. All right, thank you so much. Hopefully everyone can see that. Again, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you to the ACBC for the invitation. May I commend you for doing a sterling job of highlighting the continuing importance of the Australia-China bilateral relationship at a very challenging period. In my presentation this morning, there are three things I hope to cover. Firstly, what is the state of the Australia-China bilateral relationship from a trade perspective? and how is that reflected in the overall aggregate export numbers of Australian exports to China? Secondly, what broader factors are Australian exporters facing that may influence their actions and performance? And thirdly, how should Australian exporters proceed in light of these challenges, and whether they should engage more proactively with the Australian government? So how is the trade relationship between Australia and China? Is it demonstrating resilience despite the current tensions? The short answer is yes, but the real world answer is less than straightforward. The relationship between Australia and China, at least at the political level, is clearly at a low point. But that is not obvious from the aggregate trade numbers as shown by these tables from the ABS. Despite the tensions, including restrictions on some Australian products entering China, such as barley, coal, and wine, overall Australian exports to China continue to grow. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, Australian exports to China jumped from 134 billion in 2018-19 to 150 billion in 2019-2020. This year, monthly growth has also defied expectations. Between May and June 2021, export to China rose by 8%. The increases, as I'm sure most of you would know, is mostly, or rather can be explained by the dominance of iron ore in Australia's goods exports to China. And until recently, the persistent high price of that commodity. Remove iron ore from the mix and export numbers begin to look less rosy. The story is therefore more complex. Outside of the mineral sector, there were notable fluctuations. A number of commentators have found that Australian exporters of those goods banned from China seem to have found new markets. While that is positive, that does not change the fact that they lost a market in China, which tend to offer premium prices for their products. We must also recognize that there are other Australian exporters and products that continue to be traded with China. They are doing well, but they do worry that their products could be the next casualty in the political interplay between governments. New requirements, for example, by Chinese authorities, such as the regulations on the registration and administration of overseas producers of imported food. I understand that's Decree 248, which will enter into force on 1st of January 2022, are making exporters even more jittery. Once implemented, the measure will require all overseas food manufacturers, processors, and storage facilities to be registered with the Chinese authorities in order to export their products to China. So smaller Australian exporters have already expressed concern to us about the potential amount of work that would be required and the added costs this is likely to involve. On the other hand, China is making some effort to facilitate trade. In December 2020, China's customs clearance times fell by more than 60%, and it has ratified the framework agreement on facilitation of cross-border paperless trade in Asia and the Pacific. This initiative will digitize trade processes between participating economies. So the messages or signals being received by Australian exporters are somewhat mixed. Add the current trade tensions, and what you have is an uncertain environment for both Australian exporters and their partners in Asia. As you know, an uncertain environment is not conducive to good decision-making, and certainly does not encourage investments. Even if opportunities arise, businesses are unlikely to act on them due to the perceived higher levels of risk, real or otherwise. That said, and let me note some of these to inject, there are opportunities. Let me note some of these to inject some positivity in my presentation. By the way, you can gather some of these information from Austrade's website. For example, China will become the world's largest ice cream market in 2021. Its market size reached an impressive 25 billion in 2020, a year-on-year increase of 6.5%. Australian ice cream suppliers can compete by focusing on premium options, such as providing all natural ingredients and zero additives. I understand that ice cream is not actually categorized as a dairy product under China's customs import requirements. Another opportunity is in spirits. Australia exported almost 800,000 of gin to China in the first 6 months of 2021. This is a tenfold increase from 2020, and Australia's 10% market share ranks just third after the UK and South Africa. In addition, Australian whiskey exports to China increased sixfold year on year to $437,000. So if positioned strategically, high quality, sustainable and cost effectiveness, Australian spirits should do quite well. Social media marketing will be crucial, I think, to the success in accessing the China market in this regard. It is also worth noting that Australia remains to be the leading exporter of complementary medicines to China. China imported just over 1 billion of complementary medicines from Australia in 2020, and 70% of Australia's current complementary medicine exports actually go to mainland China and Hong Kong. So apart from the bilateral factors, a number of changes have occurred in the global trading system. Part of it has been addressed by the previous speaker. There are a number of changes in the global trading system which are having a major impact on Australian exporters' strategies and decision-making. In simplified terms, Australian exporters are currently facing three major headwinds. The first is the continuing impact of COVID. Even in China, where economic growth continued during COVID, there has been reduced economic activity in some sectors due to lockdowns or illnesses, shutdown of factories, consequential loss of customers and travel restrictions. Arguably, COVID may have also strengthened China's commitment to the dual circulation economy. This is a policy which encourages more consumption of domestically made products to encourage self-sufficiency. Arising from or related to COVID, the second headwind relates to the imbalance in supply and demand in shipping, especially in air cargo and containerized sea freight. For sea freight in particular, exporters are now paying extraordinary rates of around 3 to 5 times prior to COVID. They are also experiencing long delays in delivery and difficulty in finding space on vessels. Hopefully, I suspect other speakers will discuss this in more detail. And the third is the impact of geo-economic competition, especially among the superpowers, the US and China. It is not only complicating the bilateral relationship between Australia and China, it may actually be diverting trade flows. For example, the agreement reached by the Trump US administration with China, the so-called Phase 1 deal, led China to reduce purchases of agricultural manufacturing services from elsewhere in the world, in order for them to purchase more from the US. Overall, COVID and this embrace of strategic trade have actually now translated to a world that is increasingly protectionist. This must therefore be a factor in the longer term planning of exporters. In discussions with exporters, in particular smaller exporters, there is a real fear that they will be unable to adjust to the changing global trading environment, especially if the adverse conditions persist for the next 12 to 24 months. Some have already indicated their intention to pause trading, while some are looking to establish operations outside of Australia, closer to or in their targeted market. Of course, such a move will have a flow-on effect on market entry approaches and conditions faced by Australian businesses, including those seeking to enter China. So in light of the change in uncertain conditions, what might be the prudent steps to take? Firstly, let me emphasize that the economic gravity of China cannot be ignored. The market is just too big. So when we encourage diversification, we mean that Australian exporters should look at other markets, but as well as China. Diversification is about having a range of export markets and certainly not about abandoning China. So for those who had previous dealings with and exposure to China, maintain those relationships, because good relationships are hard to come by. For those looking to enter China, it is logical to lay the groundwork now. Another shift in the China-Australia relationship is likely to be just around the corner. For those successfully still trading with China, we'd suggest to maintain a quiet demeanor, follow the rules to the letter, and stay vigilant. Stay informed, including maintaining close contact with your partners in China. Remember, they almost have as much at stake in your success as you do. Recently, there have been discussions about gray channels to enter China. We would really hesitate, almost discourage you from pursuing this path. It's important to remember your success to trouble-free crossing should be a result of meticulous preparation of the required paperwork. While some ports might be viewed as more efficient than others, that may change on any given day simply because of who or which customs officer you get at the border. I guess it's a case of the luck of the draw in some circumstances. But right now, based on the shipping challenges, exporters are likely to be simply satisfied by finding a vessel that would actually take their goods to China at a reasonable price. It doesn't matter really what port it lands at this particular time. So on a final note, I believe it would be useful for Australian businesses to develop a coherent policy regarding the current tensions, a coherent position regarding the current tensions. And now may be the time to articulate and voice that position. It is appropriate for Australian businesses to provide input to the Australian government on its approach and policies in relation to China. That is certainly what is happening in the United States. American businesses are constantly engaging with their government to ensure that it takes account of their interest. And when the US government develops policies and negotiates with China. So the Americans are certainly doing it. I don't see any problem for Australia to do it in terms of our representation with government. I guess my final note is just a worthwhile reminder that when Australia loses its market in China, it is unlikely that we would get it back immediately. And those that fill the space are usually the business competitors from our allied partners. I'm leaving it a very controversial note, but thank you very much. That's it for me. Thank you, Virginia.
Thanks, Arnold. And I think your comments are absolutely spot on. It's very much the tack that ACBC is taking. Persistence and diversification, maintaining relationships and laying the network. And also, I love that, keep your head low and keep busy, which is exactly what we're doing. And I saw Brett was nodding in the background there too. So to move on, and thank you very much again, Arnold, to move on to discuss the topic of freighting your goods to China, up next is Brett Charlton. Brett is a global veteran, having been involved in international logistics for over 25 years. He is the Launceston-based Tasmanian General Manager for global logistics company Agility, which has over 550 offices and 22,000 staff globally. He also serves as Vice President for ACBC Tasmania and National ACBC Board Member, a dedicated supporter of ACBC and a keen proponent of Australia-China trade. It's now my pleasure to hand over to you, Brett. Thank you.
Thank you, Ginger. I will try to share my screen like everyone else is trying, and hopefully that will work. You can see my screen, I assume. Shipping to China. Before I start, please allow me to say that from Tasmania, we've been quite lucky and very blessed to not have as many COVID issues down here. But please do be aware that we're very mindful of our friends in Melbourne and Sydney and indeed around the world. So from us down here in Tasmania to our Melbourne colleagues, we are thinking of you and we're looking forward to seeing you on our island and very much us looking forward to getting across to the big island at some point. Virginia has already provided a bit of an update about myself, so we won't go into more detail about that, other to say that Agility Logistics has been purchased by a company called DSV. So we're now arguably the second or third largest international freight logistics company on the planet. And you would think that with our significant footprint, we would be best positioned to help anyone with their international shipping. But unfortunately, that's not the case for anyone. Shipping is a complete disaster at the moment. And as was mentioned by Nick One of the big issues that we find at the moment is congestion of shipping ports. There's considerable waiting time at many ports around the world, be that due to congestion of absolute volume, be that through to congestion of the actual supply chain, getting containers through to the ports, lack of drivers are some things that have been reported in China as well as in places like America and Europe. Weather events, we've just seen Typhoon Shan-Thu, which I've probably mispronounced, apologies, just hit through Shanghai. We saw the port and the airport's closed for a bit of time there. Every time a port or an airport is closed, that backlogs additional cargo. We're seeing ships being delayed upwards to 11 to 14 days in American ports. And that's quite relevant because a lot of the largest trade at the moment around the world is China through to America and China through to Europe. And I don't think there's ever been a time, and certainly in my working experience, where we haven't realised that we are definitely an island at the bottom of the planet and at the bottom of the list when it comes to shipping. And unfortunately, that's something that's going to continue for some time. On that basis, we're seeing significant issue with freight rates, particularly on imports out of China. And my experience is a lot of exporters also have imports. And whilst this is an export forum, it's important to understand that the componentry of goods that come into Australia feed into our ability to have containers to be re-exported to come out. Anyway, from freight rates at the moment, I don't find freight rates that are trying to be too confronting. We sent a 40-foot container just the other day for about $850 out of Melbourne through to Shanghai. I guess the reason for that is that's where they want the equipment back. So the shipping lines want their equipment back to where they need to get their exports out of China. So if you look at it from a shipping company's point of view, at the moment they're getting freight rates between Shanghai and West Coast of America of around $30,000 to $40,000 a 40-foot container, which is staggering. Those ships are absolutely full. From the shipping company point of view, they want to capitalise that revenue. And that does impact us on an export basis. Whereas some of the shipping lines down here are now favouring sending empty containers back to China as opposed to loaded cargo. So quicker they can get their cargo into those containers onto the higher paying trade routes, the more revenue they make. So whilst the freight rates, from my opinion, through to China aren't that bad, in fact, they're probably the lowest of anywhere around the world, there's still a challenge of getting equipment and there's still a challenge of getting space on some occasions to get back into China. That said, out of Tasmania particularly and other places, there's certainly a shortage of equipment down here. If you're looking for food quality equipment, that's an issue as well. So if you're talking containerised, that is a problem. The other issue that we're finding is with air freight, as was mentioned earlier, there were some COVID issues in Shanghai Airport and a couple other airports. We saw China Airlines stop their services through Australia. So we have a distinct lack of air freight capability. IFAM has been extended through to mid next year. There are some briefings from Australia that I recommend you hop on with Michael, who's the head of that program. So there is going to be support for air freight getting into China, but that comes with a caveat and warning that there's going to be a significant shortage of capacity to get our air freight out of the country. So there's a lot of work going into that. I couldn't give you any facts and figures, but every briefing I've been on certainly recommends that we're going to have a lot of struggle getting air freight out of the country during our peak seasons around Christmas and cherries and seafood and like. Trade issues, yes, that's already been touched on. We certainly see that. We certainly hear the rhetoric of many trade officials visiting Tasmania and giving presentations asking to diversify your market. Funnily enough, we don't see many of our exporters down here trying to do that. And I guess one of the things that is an impost on that is, again, the shipping. The shipping lines want their containers back into China. That's a mechanism that we should potentially use to try and develop our trade more so in China. So I'm going to give you some basics on shipping. These things are often forgotten about. Shipping, I've always said, is the most unsexy part of trade. You're always interested in going to visit markets when you can. You're always interested in doing your marketing, your presentation of your product and telling the story. We're just a great big smelly ship and trucks that needs to get your goods to actual market. But never have been more important. Packing for export is something that we find really struggling from time to time. We really see some exporters just not even consider their packaging. We've had cargo of the most expensive, high grade value turn up in cargo in old Kellogg's cornflake box, large boxes which have just got bits of paper written on them. Your marks and numbers are important, particularly if you're sending something less than a container load. So if you're going to be exporting a smaller quantity of goods, you're going to find that you're going to be sending a pallet or 2 pallets. If you look at the photo on the screen, that's what a transshipment warehouse looks like. That's what a warehouse looks like when your goods are being loaded into a container, when they're being discharged from a container. They need to be found. So be very important with your marks and numbers. Put the consignee as your name, the name of the company at the destination. How many pallets there are? 1 of 3, 1 of 2, 1 of 5. Make sure that you put on there some arrows. Don't be stingy as to where you put your labels. Put labels all the way around it. Now, if you're exporting something of high value, be it say canned abalone or whiskey or gin, consider wrapping your goods in black plastic and even going to the next level of putting plywood or even chicken wire around the actual goods before you put your wrapping over the top with marker numbers on the top and on the sides. And with the marks and numbers, if it's high value goods, you don't need to describe what the goods are. You just need to say where they're going to, so the destination port, number of packages, the consignee and the country. That's our suggestion. When you do your marks and numbers, let us know, because we need to put those into the manifest and bill of lading to ensure that they're identified when they are transshipped to different destinations. As much as we'd like to think that every forklift driver in the world is super qualified and they're not busy and they're concentrated solely on your goods, the chances are they're not. You will find that there are people moving goods at a rate of knots. If you've ever been in a warehouse, obviously health and safety is very, very important, but sometimes speed and having containers packed and down to the wharf takes precedence. So you should be packing your goods considering that something might happen to it. They're your goods. When you export something to your customer, you don't want them broken. We've had occurrences where exporters of high-grade honey export their goods continually in plastic pails. And a plastic pail is something that's just going to be hit by a forklift and not going to survive. And it's not pretty. And it comes at a lot of cost, but not so much of the cost that impacts on the actual exporter, because of the cleaning and all that sort of situation. But it comes at cost to you as an exporter, where your reputation and how you're sending your goods to your customer are compromised. Happens once, that's a problem. Happens twice, that's a mistake. Happens 3 times, that's a trend. We see that often. ISPM 15 packaging. If you're an exporter, you know what this means. If you're not an exporter, Google it, look it up. You need to make sure that you're using ISPM 15 packaging. Your pallets and your crates need to have that mark on them. You do not want to have goods turn up in China, any port these days. I mean, Singapore is probably one of the only places where you don't need this protocol. This is a protocol that's raised from the trading community, international trade community in Brussels, that says that you must have these protocols. It's stopping the transfer of bugs and bark and other dangerous biologicals around the country, around the world. Make sure that you have that packaging. We've found over the years that there's no particular framework for customs requirements in China. It's, as I was mentioned earlier, it depends on the customs officer you get at the time. We might have absolutely everything down to absolute T. And whilst it's in transit time, something has changed. And depending on that customs officer, depending on your context of the destination, it can cause some problems. Know your Incoterms when you're exporting with Incoterms. One of our suggestions is CIF, where you take care of the cost and insurance from the freight to get it to the final destination port. So in that regards, you're taking control of getting your shipment from your door to the destination port. The customs and compliance scenarios at the destination to the the situation needs to be looked after from the importer in China. To that regard, with China or be it anywhere else, make sure that your customer knows what they're doing when they're importing goods. We've had many occasions where we've exported goods where it's been a handshake or a Zoom handshake, and the goods have arrived in China and the person at the destination haven't got their import permit, or haven't got their documentation correct, or haven't looked at doing the markings correct. Every time that happens, it comes at a cost. We've had to, unfortunately, destroy goods in China. We've had to abandon goods in China. We've had to re-export goods out of China to another port while documentation has been fixed and then re-exported back into the destination. These are things, again, that can hold you up, but at the same time, really impacts your reputation with your end user. Basic documentation is a packing list. You're going to get this presentation, so I won't read what it is. Packing list of what the goods are. A commercial invoice that tells you what the value of the goods are. A CHAFTA certificate of origin. You can get these certificate of origins through your local chambers of commerce. There are other certificates relative to wine and that sort of like, which is Wine Australia. But your local chamber of commerce can help you with the certificates of origin. Insurance. You may not think that insurance is an issue that you need to have, but if you ever want to consider that, have a look at the Ever Given that parked itself across the canal. Every one of those containers was caught general average. So there's different types of insurance. There's insurance for actual damage. There's insurance for what happens on the ship. Think of it this way. If a captain on the bridge of the ship spills a glass of wine on his tunic during rough weather, technically under the terms and conditions of the bill of lading, we can charge you for the dry cleaning of that tunic. It is very, very, very strict. The ship is considered a carriage of your goods, and as a passenger, being cargo or being person, you have a responsibility for that ship. These costs can come back. Insurance isn't that expensive. Take it up. Already mentioned IR15 treatment. You don't need to have a fumigation certificate or a treatment certificate we've found in the past. It's enough to be able to have a declaration, but do check with your customer. It's different in different ports. If your customer says they want to have a copy of the fumigation certificate, get them a copy of the fumigation certificate. Too many people will go and get an old ISPM 15 pallet from the back of a warehouse and use that. That can bite you. Spend that extra money. Make sure that you're getting a new one with a treatment certificate. It's a little bit of cost, but it's going to lessen the issues on arrival. Health certificates, they will be discussed by other members on this panel, but you need to make sure you have those in place. We've certainly had goods come back that were destroyed due to not having those documents in place properly. Talk to us early. Space is a problem. Don't call us the day your goods are in. Speak to us a month in advance. We can help you through some of these issues. Check and double check with your customer. Already mentioned, it's very important that you check with your customer. There are still issues. Lots of hidden things that I could talk about for hours about. You send something by Singapore into China, for instance. It's possible you need to get a non-manipulation certificate to ensure that the seals haven't been manipulated at a different port. They can hold up your goods for a long time and it's an additional cost. Make sure you know how you're sending your goods. Now, my 15 minutes is a bit up. So there are a couple of little slides on here with some information about a couple of declarations in China. You'll get this, you can have a read through it. It gives you a bit more details of the ports in China, the airport in China. And the question time is towards the end of this. So looking at my clock, I've just clicked 15 minutes. Thank you for your time. I'll pass you back to our next presenter. Thank you.
Well done, Brett. A lot of very valuable information there, and we're delighted to be able to share the presentation so people will be able to pick up on that afterwards and also contact you direct if they've got any questions. Now we move to Jet Lee, our good friend Jet, the Managing Director of Quality Assurance, and he's worked for us many times in the past, and he's an expert on quarantine certification. And I know this will be of particular interest to those in the exporting of food and agricultural products. So Jet, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. Let me see how I can manage and share the screen. Okay. All right. Thank you, Virginia, for your kind invitations and introductions from ACBC. Certainly, it's my pleasure to share my experience and knowledge with you, and hopefully you can take some valuable information and help your future business. Who we are the professional firms and providing consulting service, training service, and auditing services to the food supply chain. We have our specialties in the food industries and networks in the food industries, and we help from top tier retailer customers to manufacturers and their supply chains, and government bodies, importers and exporters through our integrity service solutions, including consulting, testing, inspection, auditing, and the training, as mentioned in the past. So for those ones who are planning to export to China, the first question to you guys will be, are you ready? Obviously, as we all know, that China is #1 trading partners to Australia, count 28% or more to Australian market in 2019-2020. A few months ago, the China Bureau of Statistics did a consensus. So far, there are 1,411,780,000 people in China. It's a phenomenal market to anyone. With the Traffic's 7 years now, we have more than 93% duty-free or as professional rate, and more than 35% Australian market is China. So no doubt, China is one of the hotcakes everyone wants to achieve. COVID impact the global dramatically, and in China, no doubt, so far we can see we will be and is the quickest rebound economies post-COVID. So China is a market, everyone knows, but the challenges come along with the opportunities. And one of the top complexity challenges to everyone will be the regulatory requirements. And today we are focused on the regulatory requirements. Hopefully I can give you a bit more insight of where I know. Most of the importers will be feeling overwhelmed of the complexity of the Chinese regulations in food. It is true, there are more than 30 laws and regulations and measures in place governing the food safety in China for export and import. China finally had a China Food Safety Law published in 2015. So as you can see, it's relatively new, hence it's going to be tight and enhanced year on year. The regulatory compliance risk is not only about the complexity, but also the insufficient time for the customers to comply with the updated regulations. In 2020, there are 18 national standards are published for public comments and consultations. Including the most sensible ones is GB 19644 milk powder standard. After the first hurdle of the regulation requirements, and you also have challenges of your brand recognitions and brand awareness. Now these days, the Chinese customers has been well educated to recognize the quality and the brand, which has set a very big challenge for the new players to the market. How you impress the Chinese customers and get your brand trust through the chain. After that hurdle, after your huge investment in the marketing, get the brand recognition, you got to also think how you protect your food integrity and security to prevent the food fraud. It is a competitive market internationally and locally. So how you demonstrate your product different points to avoid your products being undervalued. Through all of these, in the last couple of years, we also see a lot of uncertainties, including the pandemic, including the relationship. But one thing, hidden agenda, and is an insight to the industries, China now have a very strong domestic consumption market. So these are all the challenges. Now let's focus on the regulation requirements and see what are the hurdles we need to jump over in the regulation requirement sections. So the regulatory bodies in China are quite significantly different compared to Australia and New Zealand. As the chart illustrated on the left, that's the structure for the regulatory bodies in China. The yellow highlighted government bodies are managed by the State Council, which define the policy and standard. The red highlighted boxes, those organizations are implementing the rules and policies. So one thing to point it out, the General Administration for Customer of China are regulating for the import, export, food safety, and tax and tariff related matters. The State Administration for Market Regulation are managing the inspection and supervisions of the imports. Okay, versus Australia, there are commercial level, Commonwealth level and state levels and the local council levels. There are 3 different tiers in terms of food regulations. So today, in the food regulations, I'll leave the rest of policies and standards to the rest of the panels that going to give you more information. But in my presentation, we're going to focus one of the key factors to help you success in China, which is the labeling. Why we say that?
Jet, sorry, could I just ask you to reshare your screen? I think it might have stopped. I'm not sure. Is that okay? Perhaps Zach could speak up, Zach, if that's an issue.
Yeah, hi, Jet. Do you just mind sharing your screen? I think I was filling in for you there, but I think it's best if you share yours.
Share screen, no problem.
Thank you. Apologise, interrupting your flow of conversation.
That's right, that's right. You can see that straight away?
No, it's not coming up. There we go.
There we go, coming through. Thank you.
Got it?
Thanks, Jet.
No problem. So as you can see in the chart, why we focus on the labeling, why we think labeling is one of the criticals that we want to provide more information through today's events and our experience. The factors tell you the truth. The status from 2010 to 2017, that 15.4% of the issues that have been non-conformance of import food in China are labeling related issues. And this is purely labeling related issues. If you look at the details regarding the additives, which is even higher than the labeling, it's also associated with the labeling as well. Last year, the status released from ChemLink that highlight 18% labeling issues of the non-conformance of getting import food to China. 18%. This is the top #1 issues of the non-conformities. It's quite frightening that why people not looking into the labels. It's a simple thing. You spend all the efforts and you're not getting what you need. So the top 5 labeling issues that non-conformance are summarized in here. That health claims tend to be the #1, that a lot of labels, when they getting translated into Chinese, that there are a lot of health related claims, which is non-conformance. The foreign languages are larger than the Chinese writings. This is a very typical non-conformance happened, that the Chinese standard set, the Chinese characters has to be larger font than foreign languages. The third issues will be the food names are not illustrate the true nature of the product itself. We'll have examples down the track. And label claims of no sugar, low sugar, but you got to make sure that has to be substantial, okay? The value of the nutrition information table are not rounded correctly, which is very little mistake. So import food legislation update in 2019 April, that China customers published the pre-packaged food products, the latest notice, and then there's some changes down there. The Chinese label for prepackaged food don't need to be registered pre-shipment, which is a good news to us. What they happened is they're going to take random samples when the product arrived at the port, and then do testing among there. The original label and the Chinese label will be also reviewed as part of the documentation required for the export. In Chinese labeling associate laws and standards, there are 3 main labeling standards which are set here, which is the GB 7718, which is the general standard for prepackaged food labels, and GB 28050 for nutrition labels, and GB 13432 for special dietary requirements. These are the standards. Also associated with the import labeling compliance, there are industry standard and product standard, and also integrate standard and other standards questions. So these are the 3 mainstreams associated with other standards as well. So we're gonna open each of the standards, have a little bit insight of what's new. For the GB 7718, the prepackaged food, they defined direct and indirect. So what means indirect means the ingredients and additives that you supply to Chinese market for food manufacturing now also following the compliance of prepackaged foods of labeling. So not only for the retailer product, but ingredients as well. Okay. Another thing is the font size of the Chinese characters are now defined no less than 1.8 mils in height. The allergen, so the little stickers, when we try to apply a sticker of the Chinese label at the original artwork, you got to be careful with the minimum height requirements down there. The allergen declaration is interesting. It's been added as a recommendations only, that there's a difference of allergens in China and allergens in Australia. The sesame, sulfite, and lupin are recognized as allergens in Australia, but not in China. So there are point of difference of labeling requirements for the direct prepackaged foods and indirect prepackaged foods. It's pretty straightforward here that I won't go through too much details. The basic requirements of the prepackaged food standards. There are 3 important points I want to highlight. One is there's definitely no reference to other products. You can't refer to other products on your label. You can't claim any prevention and treatment for diseases. Okay, that will be classified as drugs and medicines. The foreign letters can't be bigger than the corresponding Chinese characters, except the trademark. So these are the 3 main basic requirements in the standard. In the ingredient list, it's interesting to note that the ingredients that counted less than 2%, you do not need to declare. This is slightly different as Australian labeling laws. And also the ingredients, if there's no consumption history in China, you can't put into the product. Net contents, there's special requirements for the net content. For the trademark measurement in Australia is about the packaging size, but in China is about the weight, associated with the weight. If your product has more than 1 kilo as a weight, the minimum trademark should be minimum 6 mil in font size. In terms of business name and address, that you definitely need to have a manufacturer's name and address and your importers or distributors business name and address. So the information public can be a phone or email or fax number plus a physical address. The GB standard 28050 is talking about the nutrition. This on the right-hand side is a defined nutrition information table. You have to use this table. You have to follow the exactly format. One point of difference that to Australian label is the nutrition reference value. They call it NRV. So to make a point of difference, I'll illustrate down the slides in the upcoming slides. There's a basic requirements. The Chinese characters, again, should be bigger. Okay, this is repeated and repeated because it's a common mistakes being made. The nutrition label should be applied to the minimum unit of sales or retail. So this is different as in Australian laws, when we have a multi-layer packaging that can only apply, the label only need to apply on one of the layer. Okay, in China, the nutrition label has to be applied on the minimum sale retailer unit. So the nutrition expressions, there's quite interesting that, as I mentioned, the nutrition reference value in China versus the recommended daily intake values in Australia are different. For example, the energy nutrition reference value in China is 8,400 kilojoules, while in Australia is 87. So a protein and fat and sugar, they're all different. So when you do your labeling, just be reminded that the NRV values different as daily intake values. The last standard I want to explain to you is the special dietary supplies. There are 4 different categories: baby formula, complementary food for infants, and formula foods for special medical purpose, and other foods for dietary needs. So one thing to highlight is the formulated milk powder for adults and pregnancies are not classified as a special dietary supplies. And also the same for the health supplements are not classified as a special dietary supplies, which is not falling to this GB 13432. So in that standard, it's clear they're saying that for any formula foods for infant less than 6 months, you can't make any claims in terms of health contents, nutrition content, and comparisons. Okay, these are the compulsory label contents. I want to give you some examples of when I say the non-conformers. On the left-hand side, we can see this Chinese label has some illustration or indication of improve blood circulation and protect your heart and brains. These are health related and treat diseases related. So that is definitely no in Chinese label. And the top ones, certainly you can see that the English font are larger than the Chinese font. This is not allowed. Down the bottom right, that they illustrate this is the purest tea of the world. Again, you need to provide evidence to substantiate that claims. Otherwise, that can be seen as misleading expressions. What is the best practice for the labeling? So you got to make sure you provide the accurate and certified translation when you have English label to a Chinese label. Okay. When you have the nutrition translated, please do provide a nutrition test reports, because the rounding figures of the nutrition value are different in Chinese legislation. When you make a lot of claims free of additives or organic or HACCP certified, those type of claims, make sure you get evidence to provide the claims and support the claims. When you have a multi-language and multi-formulations, particularly in chocolate bars and confectionaries, this is a not good practice when you get into Chinese market, because the customer will fail your label. Ingredient list verifications generally will be better to have a specification to check against to the ingredients in declaration. The only key message is to all the people will be seek professional label service providers to provide your professional service of the label review in compliance with Chinese legislation. Overall, it's not only about the label, but label is one of the key factors. There are documents and reference and you need to get your product into China. I think our next speaker will give you more insight and details. And here we are. Hopefully we can provide you support and our services through our expertise and to help you to get your goods to China in the successful way in the future. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Jed. And isn't it interesting that now we've got 18% of the non-conforming labelling is causing issues. And I think Nick mentioned in a previous session that we ran that a lot of things are put down to there are trade wars or there are trade issues, when exactly, I think Nick, you mentioned it's to do with paperwork in many cases. So Jed, that was a very valuable presentation. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Now, for our final speaker today, we're absolutely delighted to welcome Liang from the China Certification and Inspection Group, CCIC. They are the largest third-party certification and inspection organisation in China, a Chinese state-owned enterprise with 300 offices in China and 30 overseas branches. Al has rich experience in pre-packaged food product label design, approvals and product testing. Thank you, Al, for sharing your insights today with us on China food supervision and requirements. Thank you.
Thanks, Virginia. Hi, anyone. I hope everyone got a great day today. And then today, my topic is China food supervision and requirement. Can you see it?
Yes, thanks. That's great.
Awesome. And then there was 3 parts. First of all, who we are, and also the China food safety law, Jet mentioned previously before, and also the red hot new GACC requirement. I will come to that. First of all, who we are. As Virginia mentioned, CCIC is one of the biggest third-party inspection and certification organization in China. We are the only third-party inspection and certification organization named after the China prefix. We got 30,000 employees across the globe, 400 branches, and also stringent cooperative labs. And Australia is one of the 38 overseas branches we have got. And then we both own CCIC and CQC. And then we do quality certification, commodity inspection, product testing, and also traceability. And then CCIC Australia established in 1989, which is in Melbourne, in Flinders Lane, although I'm in Sydney at the moment. And then we talk about the China food safety law. Since it's a law, it sits above all the regulations, above the notice, above all the GB standards. And then the regulation on the implementation of the food safety law, which is announced on the 11th of October 2019, take effective on the 1st of December. I only focus on the things important for as the exporters. And in this one, because we always say import, it means for you guys, it's an export to China. So that's why they focus on the import. And one of the legal requirements for food safety law as below, it's all imported prepackaged product must have Chinese label, which shall comply with the requirement of the relevant law and regulation and standards, which should also including the original produced place, importer name, address, contact should be including in the Chinese label. One of the good thing about it, it's another requirement also it's good for the exporter, it's importer from this food safety law appointed will be take main responsibility to ensure the overseas food product fully comply with the relevant legal requirements, including the Chinese label design, spec, and also the product quality. And what a coincidence, at the same year, GACC announced all the imported fruit, they don't use to follow their Chinese label anymore. And then it will be the importer who takes responsibility for the Chinese labeling. And also importer for the imported fruit and fruit additive shall, according with the provision, reported to China Custom, truthfully declare the relevant information about the product, attach the qualification material required in laws and administrative regulations. This is the final part. Now we come to the web hot just announced this year's the GACC requirements. And this year, GACC announced the import and export food safety management measure and regulations. These requirements require all overseas manufacturers to imported fruit to be registered with GACC. This requirement capture a broad range of food product, including the low-risk food product, which is previously not regulated, such as biscuit, confectionery. And in the Decree 248, regulation on the registration and administration of overseas producer of imported fruit, and also Decree 249, administration of measure on import and export food safety. This measure and requirement is for both import and export, but we only focus on import into China this time, which is export to from Australia. This regulation requires all food manufacturer and processor, even storage facility, to handle food export to China to be registered with GACC in one of the two ways. Firstly, register through the competent authority, such as in Australia is DAWR, and to inquire assessment and approval. This including meat product, seafood, dairy, bird nest and bird nest product, and honey, egg product, edible fat and oil, pasta, grains, multi-grain industry product, malt, and fresh dehydrated vegetable and dry bean, condiment, seasoning, nuts and seed, dry food and unroasted coffee bean, cocoa bean, and food for special dietary use and healthy food. And also for everything not listed above, a self-registration with GACC directly or via their agent or importer is necessary. Who is responsible for the food safety product? Previously, we mentioned in the food safety law, importer is required for take full responsibility. But actually in the GACC say, importer and export food production operator, both are responsible for the food safety, imported and export food product they produce and operate. Also, import and export food producer and operation who engage in import and export food production and business activity. Enterprise should establish their effective food safety and hygiene management and protect system to ensure the food export to China meet the requirements. And when registered enterprise find they do not meet the registration requirement, they should actively suspend export to China and take corrective measure immediately to justify their product. Import and export food safety systems. This measure should observe the following activity: import and export food production and trade activity. The customs shall supervise and manage the food safety of the producer and operator of imported and export food of their import and exports. The product and business activity of import and exporting food active and food-related product shall be carried out in accordance with the relevant regulation of the GACC. And also, GACC will do the conformity assessment of the imported product according with the provision of the relevant laws, administrative regulation on inspection of imported and export commodities. The activity of food conformity assessment, including assessment of the food safety management system in the foreign countries, export food to China, registration of overseas production enterprise, and record keeping and qualification of guarantee of exporter and exporters, and entry of animal and plant quarantine approval, and accompany inspection of certifications of conformity, document examination, on-site inspection, supervision of spot check, and inspection of import and self-record and various combination of the above. Evaluation and review of the overseas food safety management system. The GACC might conduct an assessment in review of the food safety management system and food safety status of the overseas countries and determine the corresponding inspection and quarantine requirement basis of the result of the assessment and examination finding. What this assessment is mainly about, the evaluation of the review of the food safety management system in overseas country, mainly including evaluation of the committee as the following: relevant laws and regulation in food safety, animal and plant quarantine, and food safety and supervision and management of organization, and epidemic situation and prevention of the control of measure of animal and plant outbreak, management of and control of the pathogenic microorganism, agriculture and wet drug and pollutant, safety and health control of the food production, process and transportation storage, export food safety and supervision and management, and food safety protection and traceability and recourse system of that export country, and also early warning and emergency response mechanism, and technical support capability, and other situations involving the animal and plant outbreak and food safety. And how they do the review. GACC organized expert will conduct a review of application information submitted by the country under assessment, such as written and assessment questionnaire, including the authentication, completeness, and validity of the information. And according to the information review, GACC may request competent authority of relevant country and region to supplement the missing information and documentation. For countries that have passed the document review, GACC may organize experts to carry out video inspection or on-site inspection of their food safety management system. And the problem finding in this assessment will be required for the competent department of the relevant country to carry out with certification. And evaluation and review result of business registration. Upon completion of assessment review of the country, GACC informed the competent authority of the country of the result of the review, and GACC shall implement registration management for overseas production enterprise for that country already passed the review. The registration is for 5 years and renewal required for 3 to 6 months before the expiry of the registration. If the production site is a change of their location, or the legal they sell to someone else, or the registration number granted by the country or the region is changed, the registration number shall be reapplied. The registration number in the system would automatically become invalid. Following of the overseas exporters or agent or food importer, foreign exporter or agent export fruit to China shall be followed according with GACC. Importer shall follow a record with GACC of their place of residency, and when an overseas exporter or agent of food importer files, they shall be responsible for all the information they provided. The record list of overseas exporters and agents and food importers shall be published by the GACC. When the designated port and importer declaration and entry quarantine, GACC may, in accordance with the needs of risk management, carry out designated port importer of imported fruit and designated regulatory site for inspection. The list of designated port and designated place of separation shall be published by GACC. When import fruit produce importer of their agents, they shall truthfully declare to the custom according to the law. China Customs shall, according with the law, carry out quarantine on the imported fruit product that shall be subject to entry quarantine. Food importer shall obtain their entry animal and plant quarantine permit if they export this kind of material before they sign a trade contract or agreement. What the GACC inspection in the port for? With the mean of transport and storage place meet the requirement of the food safety and hygiene, whether the container number and seal number and the content of the marking of the internal and external packaging and the actual condition of the good are inconsistent with the declared documentations, and whether animal and plant-derived food packaging and material comply with the regulation in implementation of the law and animal and plant quarantine, and whether the internal and external packaging conform with the national standard for food safety, and whether they are pollution, damage when immersion and penetration, and whether the label and labels and instruction for internal and external packaging comply with the requirements set by the laws, administrative requirements, national standards for food safety, and general administration of customs. Whether sensory trait of the fruit conform with the type of product of the fruit, and the freshness and the frozen refrigerated fruit, whether the central temperature meet the requirements, whether they are the nations, whether the freezing refrigeration ambient temperature meet the relevant standard requirements, whether the cold chain temperature control equipment facility are operation normally, whether the temperature record meet the requirements, and if necessary, cooking tests might be conducted as well. Here we go, and labels and label instructions. The packaging and labeling and marking of imported fruit products shall comply with all the Chinese laws and regulations and national standard of food safety. And the Chinese label for imported healthy fruit and special dietary fruit must be printed on the minimum sales packaging, should not be affixed. If there was special labeling provision for the internal external packaging for imported fruit, they shall be implemented in accordance with the relevant regulations. What if my product is non-conformant? Imported fruit products shall be allowed to be imported if they are qualified by the customs. If the imported fruit is not qualified by the custom should issue a certificate of non-conformity. If the item enrolling safety and healthy and environmental protection are not qualified, the customs shall notify the fruit importer in writing and order it to be destroyed or returned. And if the item fail, the importer shall be allowed for the technical treatment to meet the requirement of the conformity assessment. If the relevant imported fruit cannot be technical processed within the prescribed time, is still unqualified by the technical treatment, the customs shall order the fruit importer to destroy it or to return it. Food recall. If a fruit importer discovers the imported fruit does not comply with the law, administrative regulation, and national standard of the food safety, or if there is evidence that it might be endanger human health, it shall, in accordance with the provision of the food safety law, immediately stop importing, selling, and using the fruit, implement a recall, and notify the relevant production operator and also customer, and record a recall and with notification, and report the fruit recall and notification and handling for the local custom. And then all the fruit import recall, it will be done by the SAMR, the State Administration of Market Regulation. That was another new organization formed in 2018. So that's it. Thanks very much.
Al, thank you so much for going through that detailed information. I think so much valuable content, and we're very glad we can share your presentation and also the people get in touch with you. So thank you for making yourself available. We now move on. We've got about 10 minutes for questions at the end. So there are quite a few questions coming through. If we can't get through all of them, we will try to pass them on to our speakers so that they can answer them for you. Perhaps if I can start with Brett with one of the first ones. And Brett, given your global logistics expertise, could you discuss the challenges shipping manufactured goods from Ningbo to either Melbourne or the USA, the problems that are being encountered? Thank you.
Yes, as I alluded to in my discussion, the shipping channels, particularly for import, are quite strained. What we're finding is, and as briefly as I can possibly put it, and simply, is that there's more volume of cargo than there is capacity to carry. In 2019, there was no desire to build new vessels. In 2020, when COVID hit, with shipping lines parked their vessels thinking things were going to be difficult. Now, 2021, we're seeing stimulus packages and people buying many products as a result of not travelling and having more equity in their homes, so to speak. So, in short, freight rates are significantly high on imports to Australia. 40-foot container on the east coast of Australia, probably sitting around 9,000, 9,500. We expect that to increase as we go into the next few months. Into America, that's even more drastic. There's significant delays at the ports of Los Angeles, pretty much all ports really. There's a lack of trucking drivers in the USA. So any exports out of China at the moment are certainly being impacted by these factors that I just mentioned. Expect delays, expect issues getting your equipment, and expect high freight rates. Don't expect it to be fixed anytime soon. Some of the forecasts we're hearing is that this should go into at least mid next year, perhaps even longer.
Yeah, that's the message we do hear. That's a consistent one, certainly. I've got a question now for Al, just in relation to asking you, will all overseas food manufacturers need to be registered with China Customs from the 1st of January 2020 if they want to export to China? And I gather that's Regulation 248. If you could just let us know what your views are on that. Thank you.
Yes, actually, for all the import and exporters, for everyone, especially for exporter from Australia to China, for every manufacturer and operator, they need to be registration. But at the moment, I can see the question from the chat also say how to do it. At the moment, there was no details on how to do it as yet, because they just announced this measurement and requirement, but they haven't got a guideline to how to do it. So if when the guideline comes out, I will maybe make myself available for ACBC, maybe to give another update for everyone else.
Thank you. And I see in the question, there's been some question and answer, very kindly, Arnold has been answering things online, a question from Kinross Dairies in relation to registrations. And I think it probably aligns with the question also that about needing to register your company to export to China. Perhaps Arnold, you might like to pick up on that just with a very quick answer. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Virginia. To be honest, I actually think the others might be a better place to answer this, but certainly securing licenses and permits often involve multiple government agencies, and the complexity, of course, will depend on the product. To secure an import license, certainly one has to approach the Ministry of Commerce. Please note the importer should actually manage the application. Certainly the food and beverage, the State Administration for Market Regulation, the National Health Commission, of course, and the GACC are key agencies. But I think Al and the others are probably better placed in terms of what kind of, or rather how the process should be undertaken.
All right. Thank you. Perhaps we can take that offline, and the person who was inquiring might like to email them direct to get the answers to that one. Nick, a question for you, and this is pretty broad. What is the strategy to sell my product directly into China? So I think that's going to be quite a long answer. Maybe I can put Frank from Wine Saber Holdings in contact with you direct to get a little bit of advice on that. If you just had a couple of words you'd like to share.
Yeah. Thanks, Virginia, and thanks for the question. Obviously, it depends on what your market strategy is as to the approach in terms of direct or indirect. Let me just give an example. Let's say we've got a food product exporter that has got a direct relationship with a retailer, whether it be Sam's Club or whether it be Hema Fresh. Hema Fresh or Sam's Club may act as the importer of the product, importer of record, and then there's a commercial relationship between you. They buy X Works or whatever it may be, and then that's a direct relationship. But when you start needing to serve multiple customers, or when you need to have representation on platforms, if it's a product that is e-commerce platforms, then you need to look to have distributors or TPs or Tmall partners, Taobao partners, etc., to work with to sell the product. So really depends on the strategy as to what that model is. It might be a hybrid between direct and indirect, or it might be a completely indirect distributor model.
Oh, thank you for that one. Now, I've got a very specific question here from Glenn Sutherland. And Glenn, I know you have your fantastic alpaca, beautiful materials and products. And he's got a question on the duties and taxes that there would be on clothing and quilts. I think, Glenn, probably this panel's not positioned to answer that, but could I refer you to the Austrade website, which has all the information on the China-Australia Free Trade Agreement and the HS codes. If you have any difficulty with that, please send me an email and I will do you an introduction to someone who would be able to help you with that one. Now, there was a question here, and I think, Alan, you may be able to help this. It's a specific one regarding export of phytosanitary and fumigation treatments. And is it going to be, is it going to be increasingly difficult with the pending changes to the current methodology due to environmental concerns? So do we need to discuss alternate treatment options for fumigations, etc.? And are there industry bodies who can assist on the ground in China?
Because I want to know a bit more detail on this one first. So that's why maybe we can email it to me, and then we can look into this for them.
Sure, happy to do that. Very happy to do that. Now, we've got Kinross Dairies also asked another question, and I'm not sure who's best positioned to this, is how do you register as an exporter on GACC? Can somebody help with that one?
Yes, at the moment, you can't do it yet, as I mentioned previously, and then because they don't have the actual guideline for how to do it yet. They announced the measure and requirement, but they don't have the guideline for the detail and which portal you need to use. I just, one of my friends still in Beijing, it's writing this guideline at the moment. So once it comes out, and then I will make myself available to tell everyone how to do it and what documentation it's required.
Oh, terrific. And look, please feel free to use us as a vehicle for getting that information out. And we do have a regular newsletter, and we're very happy to send updates to our members and friends on
And then another thing is I heard that they might be, although in the 1st of January, they might delay it to implementation in order for the registration requirement. They might. Don't count me on that, okay?
And that just shows the importance of having that in-country expertise and to really have this terrific access to your expertise and to those of the others on the panel. We've got about 3 minutes. I wondered if any of the panellists had any comments they'd like to make or any questions of the other panellists, anything, or Nick, if you would like to add any final remarks in the last couple of minutes before we close.
Look, thanks, Virginia. I might just make a final remark. I was really impressed to see the level of detail that our speakers went into. For exporters, yes, there is complexity. Yes, there is a lot of detail. The devil is in the detail. Once you understand the export requirements for your particular product, for the category, all the way from booking the container to the package labeling, all the way through to the product registration, to all of the requirements that you need, it's critically important to, number one, get that in place, but number two is then to stay very, very close to any regulatory changes. So for food exporters to China, you will be seeing a lot of change in the regulatory environment that will be occurring in the next 6 months, or maybe not in the next 6 months, as Al just mentioned. We've heard also rumours of delays for those regulations to come into place. So do your homework, work with experts that really know their stuff, that can help you to navigate some of the complexities in this very dynamic time. But also, one of the other things that, if I can make a comment on some of the themes from majority of the presentations, is that there are market opportunities there, but nothing is ever easy, is it? So it's a matter of really working with people who know their stuff and navigating that landscape to maintain that market engagement and growth with China. Thanks, Virginia.
Thanks, Nick. And it's great having someone of your quality and expertise up there in China. We know we can reach out to you. So I hope our guests would realise that they can do that. So,
Virginia, can I just also quickly note that I learned a lot actually by attending this webinar session. And while I conveyed a lot of the concerns that we tend to hear from smaller exporters, was actually really good, certainly in the context of what I'm certainly taking away from this session, is that while things are challenging, and again, in one sense, this echoes what Nick had just mentioned, is that there is actually very good support out there. So effectively, there's Nick, and there's Brett, and there's Jet, and there's certainly Al, and certainly you as well, Virginia, in the context of anyone needing assistance in terms of exporting to China. So those are certainly, I will certainly convey that to our members. Thank you.
Arnold. Thank you. And thanks again. And a huge thank you to all our speakers, Nick, Arnold, Brett, Jet, and Al. Really appreciate your time and sharing your expertise. We're finished on time, almost, just 1 minute over, I think. As I mentioned, this is number 2 in a series of 12 webinars we're running for the Global Alliance program, and we go right through to November next year. So keep your eye on your email box, and information on our next session will be sent to you after this session. If you'd like to get in touch with any of our speakers, as I've continually said through the session, do reach out to us or directly to them. Finally, we're busy working not only on export, but on a range of other not to be missed sessions coming up. We have our education roundtable on the recalibrating of the new reality of international education. That's on the 23rd of this month. And we have a members only trade update with DFAT and Austrade on the 22nd of September to give you those important facts and insights on where we are with our trade with China. So I look forward to seeing you all then. And in the meantime, stay safe and well and happy. And thank you very much again for our guests for joining us and our speakers today. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Everyone.